So I want to welcome someone very special. This is Mr. Lee. He is the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army. And from what I hear, you had a chance to meet one of our soldiers down in San Antonio. And we're gonna have her up here so that way we can hear her story. What was your initial reaction to hearing her story?
Well, I heard and had the opportunity to be at Brooke Army Medical Center down in San Antonio, which was a real privilege for me as a CASA, representing, the people of Ohio, but also representing the entire Army on behalf of the Secretary. And as a CASA, we're the eyes and ears of senior leadership in the Pentagon and then in major units across the country and across the globe. And so I have worked with people in the medical area for about 17, 18 years. And you meet all kinds of wonderful people and soldiers and families. And when I met Sergeant Leon, she is one that really in my memory that really stands out. And her story is a celebration to me of the opportunities that the Army offers young people, and sometimes not so young, to serve the country, but to take a different path than they might have originally thought about as they were growing up. And the paths might be going one direction, which may not be what they'd really like to look like when they're 65 years old like me, and they look back and they want to see what their legacy looks like and what history they've made. And what I saw in Sergeant Leon is that she's been in the Army 16 years. She could have taken a path that might have led her, to drugs, to, bad events in her life. But she chose to take a good path and to take a path of opportunity that the Army provides in discipline and values and morals, ethics, integrity, and that she became an American soldier. And to me, that's as important a job or a career to be a part of the team that protects the freedom of our country and all the people like me that are out there. And so I wanted others to hear this story. And so we worked on it, and we're all really excited about the chance for others to hear Sergeant Leon's story of what I think is a real victory for her and for the American people.
And part of her story that was unique to you, I know we kind of discussed it a little bit before, but is she had a mentor. Mm-hmm. And you want her story to go out, not just to young people out there, but you also wanted to reach out to who else?
Well, and I believe that there are people in your lives that can help make a difference in your life. And in her case, part of the story was this band instructor, a teacher, that, saw the potential that she had as a young person and wanted to make sure that she was doing her homework, making sure she was doing her lessons, that she was going to school, and trying to help her make sure that she was moving forward with her life's path. And I wanted the story told of that teacher who, with this one person, made a difference and got her on a path that has just been phenomenal. And I want to celebrate that teacher and other teachers and other administrators and coaches and to do the same thing that she has done. And I'm sure that other coaches have and teachers and instructors have done for others too. But we need to recognize those people and the impact that they can have on the lives of our young people.
Welcome, Sergeant Leon. So we just spoke with Mr. Lee, and he was able to kind of give us a little bit of insight into your story. You met him down in Fort Sam Houston in Texas, and you were able to share your story about how an educator influenced your life through high school, after high school, and all the way through your military career. So what we wanted to do today is actually just bring you here and give you a platform to go ahead and tell your story. Maybe you can influence some of those students and those educators to make a decision about what's best appropriate for their life.
So first, Sergeant Sharp, I'm really humbled by the chance to be up here and speaking with you and others about the experience that I had in high school and with my mentor. Miss Sarah Brown was my mentor, and I met her in the 9th grade of high school, and she maintained a positive relationship with me since then, all the way through high school, through graduation, and all the way to now. I can call her for anything that I need to call her for, from how to just conduct myself through a situation, all the way through finances, whatever it might be. I describe Miss Brown as having a strong personality, and I am described often as having a strong personality, so I definitely think I might have picked that up from her.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I believe I also call it intensity. I can be a little more intense than I may intend to be, and that is something that I definitely picked up from her. I feel also that there's a lot of character strengths, just overall thinking through the things that I am saying and doing, and trying to remain a mirror to myself. Caring. Sarah cares. Sarah thinks through what she's doing for her students, and she cares about their well-being. I'm a combat medic because I care for the well-being of individuals. I care for my junior non-commissioned officers. I care for the soldiers that are underneath me. And I always try to look into their lives to see what is creating whatever conundrum I'm dealing with at that moment. The same exact thing that Sarah did with me in high school, to find out what is it that made that young girl stop coming to school. It wasn't my principal that called me. It wasn't one of my other administrators that called me. It wasn't my counselor that called me. It was my band director that called me and said, why did she stop showing up to school? Those are characteristics I think I definitely took from her. If I was to talk to an educator, I would tell them that they're in a wonderful position to reach the students who have the greatest need. Those students might not always seem approachable, but those students do want the help, and those students do need the options. So take advantage of themselves, being that they are the most respected person to a lot of those students. If I had to describe Ebony in that time frame, I would describe her as a person who was a survivor. I was looking at the next day or the day after. I was doing what I had to do to keep life together, to keep it from falling apart. I think I looked at life as a series of events I felt like that were just happening to me, and I was trying to hold together the seams of a box, if that makes sense. I think what really caused it was just having a large transition so fast, honestly, from being in 8th grade and having 2 parents and 5 siblings. And then in a matter of, it felt like months, my parents were divorcing. I had my mother leave the younger children. I had the older children move out on their own. I did elect to stay with my father, but I thought my father would be there. And then it was, he got a girlfriend, and he'd be gone for a day, then 2 days, then it'd be a week, 2 weeks, and before I knew it, a month had gone by, and I'd woken up every day and my father wasn't there. The problem started to occur of, you'd notice the refrigerator is empty, but how do you get more food? I'm a child, so those problems weren't as easy for me. Well, now the lock is broken on the door. Well, how do I fix these things? Well, people are trying to break into the house. Well, how do I get them to not do so? The phone service stops working on the house. The TV is no longer working because the cable has been shut off. I, as a child, didn't understand that. The water and electric companies are coming to the house asking for money. So the only thing I knew to do was to try to get money so that I could pay for these things. I didn't handle all of the problems as well as I could have, but I tried to handle them all as best as I knew. And that's how I ended up with the 2 jobs. But I definitely had the feeling multiple mornings when I woke up of, does anybody care if I even wake up? I remember wondering if it was just better if I had disappeared somewhere so that the house would then be better suited for my father and his new family to come back to it without me in it. If I was just a blockade keeping him from being able to live in his home with his family. That was the nature of my feelings as someone as young as I was. But I didn't want to just disappear. I had enough in me to say, I know that I care if I wake up. Which is why that phone call, whenever Mrs. Brown called me and said, "Where are you?" was so important to me. Someone cared that I opened my eyes that morning. And she proved that to me. I cared, but someone else cared. There was one other person that helped me to get through those times, my childhood best friend. She didn't know much either, honestly. She had her own set of struggles during that time. But she had been my friend before everything started. And during the time that things started, she would try to friend me through it. I remember when I did eat, it was typically because her mother had cooked and she would try to make sure I was eating as well. So she definitely helped me through those times. And she lived close by, so when I would really get scared that someone was going to get into the house, I remember running up to her apartment sometimes and not telling her mother why. That's why I had 2 jobs, because the laws in Columbus, Ohio did not allow me to work full-time. But nobody was tracking that I had more than 1 job. So I would leave one job when I had to, and then I would just go to the other job and work again. It was easy for some reason for me to calculate, okay, I have a check, and that check is what I need. I would put the check in my shoebox. I would keep that shoebox underneath the bed and just collect my checks there. I didn't have any financial sense or the skills that you would have necessarily. I just would wait for the bill collector to come to the door. Back then, that's what they did. And they would say, you need $300 or so in order to keep the electric going. Well, I would just endorse the check over to the person at the door. It didn't matter if the money was quite $300 exactly, because by the time they come to the door, they actually need more than that money. That's just what they need to keep it on. So they'll take the entire check. Actually, one time, I didn't have enough. My shoebox had run dry for how many times the collectors had come to the door for different things. And the water guy felt so bad for how many times he'd had to come to the door, because it began to be monthly for these individuals. And he told me, I'll wait here, take a shower, and then I'll cut the water off. So he allowed me to get that one last shower in, and then he went ahead and cut the water off. I don't think I had a lot of skills necessarily. I think that when you're in a situation where all you have to ponder on is how do I get through this, it literally becomes something that you create in the moment. When I met her, she had no idea of any of these things or any of these at-home conditions. But in order to work the amount of hours that I needed to stay up with these bills, I would leave school and work until around 2 in the morning. Then I would walk home and go to school at 6. It was a lot to do with my decision to stop going to school when I tried to stop going, because I just didn't have enough sleep. I was trying to sleep more and just start working whenever the work hours were there. It was a simpler solution. Things were just starting to fall apart. And I was showing some of the effects of the stress of things. So she was picking up on the signs, the signals that things weren't okay. When I began to stop showing up at school, that was when, for me, the relationship really started to solidify. Like I said, that phone call where someone actually cared was what I seen on my side. But every day was so packed of go to school, go to work, go home, get 4 hours of sleep, go to school, go to school. It was a bit of a blur at times for me. But what I remember in my blur of events was always that one solid object. And she was always that one solid object for me. So eventually, during the process of knowing me, she found out several little things that she was able to help me with. The shoebox was one of those things. Once she found out about the shoebox, she was actually able to inform me that this was not a normal way to keep money. She asked me how I ever came up with cash. And I did have a way. I would take some checks to the local grocery store, but you couldn't just cash a massive amount of checks. So I would just hold them in the shoebox for when the bills would come. When she found out about this, she actually took me to a bank, sat with me, helped me start a bank account. I ended up with a debit card, a checkbook, and a proper way to balance an account. She showed me how to use the book that comes with the checks to know how to balance my whole account and to start a little personal accounting record. During the time of high school, there was just conditions that were created where she was able to discover. Because for band, you have late night practices, late night football games. The program is designed where your parents would need to be involved in bringing you home and taking you to practice and things. I had leaned heavily on my friends to bring me around, or siblings at times, but I had come to the point where that failed. And she, in that time frame, she was able to discover, hey, there is something amiss about what's going on with her. So being that she had discovered it, there wasn't a coming to moment for either of us. It was just well, now she knows. I definitely decided at one point there was no reason to continue to go to school. I was just going to work the job, and I'm not sure how deliberate that decision was to quit school. I don't think that word was really going through my brain as much as the decision was, I'm just not going to wake up right now. I'm not going to go to school today. And then it felt so good to get sleep and then get up and going to just go to work that day, that the next day it became easier to just not wake up and go to school. That would have for sure become my norm, but when she called and said, "Where are you?" and I didn't have an answer that made sense, because I was not going to say to her, I'm going to quit school. It's different to go through the actions of something without ever admitting to yourself, this is what I'm actually doing, I'm actually quitting school, than it is to actually say out loud to someone, I'm quitting school. That was not something I was willing to be accountable for. Therefore, I didn't want to say it, and I wasn't going to say it. So the only thing I could say was, I'll be there tomorrow. And then once making a promise that I would be there tomorrow, well, I had to own that promise. So I got up that next day and went to school. On top of that, I made that promise. Someone cared enough to call me and say, where are you? Therefore, if someone actually cared that I made it to school, then I was going to make it to school. So I made it to school most days after that, but when I wouldn't make it to school, she would call, and I would know, again, she cared. She cares enough to call me again, even though she's called before, but she's calling again today. She cares. So I guess my message to a coach or a band director out there who has that longevity with their students is just don't stop caring.
I'm Sarah Brown, and I was a high school band director for 30 years. My first 5 years was at John Glenn High School in New Concord, which is the home of John Glenn. And then I went to Illinois at H.D. Jacobs High School for 4 years. And then I spent the rest of my career at Groveport Madison High School in Groveport, Ohio.
Okay. Is that where you met Ebony?
And that's where I met Ebony, yes.
So your position was band director at that time?
Right.
Well, through all the teaching positions.
Yes, yes.
And so one thing that we did talk about was how band directors and coaches, they're placed in a very unique position because you're going to have interaction as long as they stay in the band or as long as students stay in sports. Those two positions are going to be able to have the most contact with the students and be able to observe some of these changes. When you first met Ebony, I'm sure you probably remember the first interaction, but what did that go like?
Well, you know, so I kind of see the kids when they're in 6th, 7th, 8th grade in middle school. I would go to the middle schools, help out a little bit with the band rehearsals, but they each had their own band director. And then I would recruit the 8th graders into coming into the high school band. And as I look back on it, I am shocked. I don't know how Ebony even got to the point where she was enrolled for high school band, did all of the prerequisites of signing up, prepaying, filling out all the medical forms and the band camp forms, and paying for all of that, and going to band camp, coming to summer rehearsals and going to band camp. That period of that summer before her freshman year seemed to be a time period where she was able to have some help from home and some guidance from adults in her life. As the freshman year came about, I began to know her a little bit better through some events that happened. She got very ill when we went to a marching band contest, and she was in the squad, and the band waited until she was released, and we went home and took all the buses home, and I definitely wanted to talk to one of her parents when they picked her up. Well, we were there a pretty long time, and then an older sister picked her up, but the sister didn't really seem that much older than she was, so nothing was really said. The next morning, I was still concerned about it, and I wanted her parents to know what had happened, and so I tried to call, and there was no answer, so I went over to her house. Her mother answered the door, explained that she was packing, and she would be leaving with her younger children that day. And so she was sorry to hear that Ebony was sick, but that she was not going to be there anymore, which I was flabbergasted, and I just felt so awful for Ebony. I never saw Ebony when I went over there. I just saw her mother and a bunch of boxes that had been packed at the house. And so as the years went by, I would have opportunities where I would give her a ride home. She would tell me a few things. She would tell me a few things about how she thought I was doing as a band director. And we'd have little conversations. And then she would just say something that was like, and I'd say, I'm driving, I'm like, Ebony, that's not right. That's not how things happen. And she would be like, oh, it's not. And so through those chance encounters, or, when you have a band, the kids tend to congregate in the band room long before practice starts, probably just like sports do. The kids are in the locker room. I always made sure that I was available to the students. I did not lock myself into my office and just come out for the beginning of practice. I always made sure that I was out there, and little things might happen. Kids feel comfortable coming up to me. Ebony might come up to me and say, oh, do you like my hair today? And I'd be like, no. She's like, oh. And little things like that, and then things would get a little more serious, like, so I had to buy, so excited, I'm gonna buy a mini fridge. Why, Ebony? High school, you're in high school, what do you need a mini fridge for? Well, to put by my bed. I'm like, what are you gonna keep in there? Food to eat? Why can't you just put food in the refrigerator in your house? Because it won't be there. If I'm going to buy my own food, I want to be able to eat my own food. If I buy that food and I put it in the refrigerator downstairs, other people will eat it. And I'm like, Ebony, that's not right. That's not how things work. And she bought a vacuum. She bought a vacuum so she could vacuum her room. And somebody in the household made her take it back and get the money back for it, even though it had been her money that she spent it on. So here she's living this life that she doesn't, I think she has a clue that it's not normal, but she doesn't really know it. And she's staying at this house as a junior and senior in high school by herself. I don't mean, oh, mom and dad work and they don't get home till 6 or 7. I'm talking about she lives at that house by herself. I couldn't even think of a time when I was in high school that my parents weren't home at night. Yes, they might have worked. Yes, they might have had an outing. They might have done something, but I never went to bed knowing that I was going to wake up in the morning and my parents weren't going to be there. So all of these things just kept happening, and I would think to myself, that's just not right. How is that happening? And some other things happened, and I'd be like, Ebony, no, that's not what happened. So I always felt a strong pull with Ebony to make sure that she had the things that she needed, but not in a way that I was providing for her. I never wanted to be a pseudo parent or anything like that. I just felt that she needed a little more help. And that's not to say that Ebony is the only student that I've had that I've gone to their house or that I've tried to steer in a certain direction, but she's definitely one of the ones that was a constant. She was in my class every day, well, when she showed up, and she was not only in my class, but then there would be evening practices, so I would see her then. I would see her on Fridays after school for rehearsal, and then we'd go to a football game or have a home football game. And on 2 or 3 Saturdays, we'd also have a competition in the fall. So I was around quite a bit of time. She spent far more time with me probably than her own family, I would guess, at that point in her life. So I was able to see the things, and I was able to say, hey, let's go out to dinner, or hey, yeah, I'll take you shopping. That's what I do.
When she graduated, what type of contact did you guys maintain afterwards?
It was sporadic, and usually she would just call me out of the blue and it'd be like, hey, guess what I'm gonna do? And I'd be like, okay, and are you sure? And so, and then it became a little more, when you graduate, you kind of like just want to be done with all that high school stuff, and you're free and you can do what you want. And I think she had her fill of it and figured out that it's not all it's blown up to be, as far as getting to have your own apartment and do your own thing. And once she had that apartment is when she decided about the Army, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
So when she first came to you, because that's one of the things that she did mention was that she brought up the Army and the military as a whole to you. What was your first response on that?
Great. You've got a plan. That's always been one of my things. Well, whatever you're going to do, have a plan. How is that going to benefit you? What are you going to specifically do with it? And what are your aspirations as far as going towards that goal? What do you think you're going to get out of it?
Do you have any, what's your tie to the military? Do you have family in? Just kind of,
my father was drafted at the end of the Second World War, and he was in a military band. But then, he got on a boat and went to Japan, and since it was near the end, he was there for the end of it, and then came back, went back to college. He was in college, and joined the National Guard and directed a National Guard band for probably 30 years, at least 30 years. He directed the National Guard band at Rickenbacker in Columbus. Mm-hmm.
Now, I know you have a tie to the military. As far as other educators, I've through my high school career, recruiters weren't allowed in the high school. Were they allowed in the high school at any of the ones that you were at?
I only remember one time at Groveport, and I don't know if it was the same time that Ebony remembers. Now, I was there 21 years, and I remember one time when they were they were having pull-up competitions and measuring your body fat and kind of going at it from the physical and, strength and how fit are you, physical fitness type direction. And I think it was in the Commons area, and they were there during all of the lunch periods so that kids could go out and talk to them. But I don't really remember much more than that, and I could be wrong. I did not spend my whole day at the high school. I also went to middle school, so I could be wrong about that. I did have my own son go through the school, second grade until he graduated, and I don't remember anything as a parent having anything presented to him.
Did you ever have talks with any other educators about military service and recommending or discouraging military service, as far as from the educator perspective?
Not really. It's kind of a non-entity. It's not there. It might be under the rug, but it's not.
It just wasn't present.
It just wasn't present at all. Yeah. Unfortunately, I believe my niece and nephew both are in National Guard, and it paid for their whole college.
Paid for mine.
And they're still in, and they're gonna retire with the, you know, even just from the National Guard standpoint, from the amount of time that they've done. So there are definitely benefits.
When it comes to educators, what would your message be to them, whether they're for the military, against, or even indifferent? They just don't have a decision. I know one of the biggest things you said was have a plan. We always talk about that too, but what would your comments be to them?
I would say, especially if a student comes to you and says that they're interested in that, and that it may seem like a last ditch effort to be able to do something in life, to look at it and help those students explore the various avenues that they can take in order to go into the Army. There's just so many avenues of career choices, and the benefits of being in the Army are things that can literally last a lifetime for the people who choose to join that. And I think it's a great career choice for individuals. Not all individuals. Not everybody can make it in the Army. You know, not everybody's strong enough. That's a for sure. And I can understand why that person might have told Ebony, you're going to get eaten alive. However, the Army also does provide the push and the drive, and really helps individuals in that area if they're willing to take a little bit of grief for a lot of glory.
Okay, awesome. It's great to have you two sit down and be able to hear some of the unique stories. So not only was she a mentor through high school, but also you've continued being a mentor throughout your military career. Are there any special things that you've throughout the years that come to mind?
I'm sorry, it's just... Who starts speaking, me or you?
Well, you could tell about Mark.
Oh. So, my husband, when he was ready to propose, I brought him back to Ohio to meet my whole family, and of course, he had to meet Sarah. And I call Sarah Mom. So he understood that he was meeting Mom. And he brought along a wedding ring. I was not aware of this. So whenever he met her, he pulled her aside in one of the adjacent rooms and asked her for permission to ask me to marry me.
No, honey. To marry him.
Okay, to ask me to marry him.
It's fine. You can keep going.
Yeah. I assume that she gave permission because I am actually married now. And it was a beautiful wedding, and she was there, of course, sitting in the front row.
I was. And he's a wonderful young man. And I don't know if anybody's good enough for Ebony, but he's pretty close.
So there's a story I heard about a gift that she gave you. Care to share what that gift was?
So when I graduated high school, she gave me a gift, and I definitely would not have graduated high school had it not been for her, everything that she did. So this gift was very special to me, and it was a book. Within this book was a disc, and on the disc there was a song. The song was titled, I Hope You Dance. I took this disc and I walked around my neighborhood for, I want to say, an hour listening to this song. Well, it just so happened that I remembered this song from until this day for every time I had a hardship. And I would ask myself, and still to this day ask myself, are you dancing? Even in a combat situation, when I'm dealing with a difficult moment, I ask myself, are you dancing? And I will get up and I will do what I need to do because I feel like I need to dance in that situation.
Awesome.
And I can tell you that Ebony is dancing every single day, and I am the most proud teacher in the world.